Now, you don't get a lot of gratitude in what you do, people. You really don't. You get a lot more abuse than you get gratitude. But I'm coming from a foreign country because I can see from outside what you did. And I'll tell you what, I've got a big thank you for you guys and a huge pat on the back because you saved your country and gave it a second chance, and that gave my country a chance. You've got to think of what you did, people. If you'd stayed home, where would you be now?
Speaking Russian.
But even more than that, and maybe even more importantly, what you people have done is to kickstart the second American Revolution. I've been to more than 30 states. I've spoken to more than 200 of your audiences, from the reddest of the red states to the bluest of the blue states. There are hundreds of thousands of people in this country now who understand the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the separation of powers and states' rights and all your amendments, the good ones and the bad ones, and the difference between them. There are more people with a depth of understanding of what makes America different than there have been since the Revolution. And that's an amazing thing, folks. That's an amazing thing. I never thought I'd see it. I was as surprised as the left by what you guys have done. And what you have done, you know, you've taken back county commissions all over this country. You've taken back school boards. You've fought back Agenda 21 and Common Core. You've made the left work for everything, people. Everything. The battles they thought they'd won, you've made them fight them all over again. And one of the most important things you've done, and this is so important in this country, and I'll get a bit crude here, but I'm a Kiwi, you have stiffened up state legislatures all over this country, and now they can give the finger to the federal government. And that's very, very important. Very important. It's one of your big bastions of freedom here. I'll tell you this. I was at a progressive conference 3 weekends ago in Washington, D.C., the 50th anniversary of the Institute for Policy Studies. Hardcore Marxists, a lot in my book about them. I put on my badge, my name badge, paid $75, and I mingled with the Marxists. Because I wanted to find out what their plans were, what they wanted to do, all the dastardly schemes they've got in mind. And you know what? I got bored rigid. Because you know what they spent all their time talking about? You guys. Tea Party this, Tea Party that, Tea Party this, Tea Party that. I got bloody bored. They took back the state houses, they took back the school boards. We weren't watching, they snuck up on us. They took it out of our hands. We've got to change this. Tea Party, Tea Party, Tea Party, Tea Party, Tea Party. All day long. I got sick of it. So if you guys don't understand your victories, I'm telling you what, your enemies do. Because they knew what they had, and you took it off them, and you don't even know you took it off them. But they knew what you took off them, and they are annoyed, folks. That's why you get the dirty names. If you weren't effective, they'd ignore you. Now, I'm going to do something next that is normally considered quite rude. But as you can guess by now, I am a bit that way at times. Okay? Because it's not kosher, right, for a foreigner to come into someone else's country and tell them how to do things. A bit like going to your neighbour's house and telling them how to do their decor. But I get asked this all the time, people, because I see a movement now that's 3 years in. A lot of people are a bit burnt out. A lot of people are a bit disappointed, a bit frustrated. Do we carry on? Are we making a difference? Is it worthwhile? Is anyone listening? Where do we go next? I hear this all the time. And I'm going to give my view of the situation and some suggestions. And you can take them or leave them, you know, it's over to you. But I see this. This is how I see it. You've got 20, 30, 40 years to turn this country around. It's going to be a long process. The first American Revolution was 20 years. Not just the fighting, but everything that came after. But you've got two huge battles coming up. You've got 2014 and 2016. And if you lose 2016, it might be all over from then, folks. There might not be much more to do after that point. So you've got 3 years, basically, to save this country. Now, you've got a lot of choices as a movement and as individuals. I hear some people in the Tea Party, they're so disgusted with the GOP, and I can understand why. Third party. We've got to form a third party. We've got to fly the flag and stand up for what we really believe in. We have to do that. And I can understand, you do that, you feel real good, you fly the flag, and you lose. You do what Ross Perot did in '92, you hand the Democrats an easy win, and your children live in slavery. Or you can get out of politics altogether. To hell with this, I'm going to hunt more ducks or play more golf or whatever I like doing. You feel real good for a while and your children live in slavery. Or you can do local issues alone. All very important, but if you lose sight of that big picture, your children will still live in slavery. So like it or not, folks, there's only one political force that can stop the Democrats in 2016. There's only one, and that's the Republican Party. But the real, don't worry, ma'am, the real big issue is the character of that Republican Party. Because if the old guard wins out, they'll give you a Chris Christie or a Jeb Bush, and you'll lose. And even if you fluke a win, you still lose. Because progressivism just rolls on. You know, Jeb Bush, big Common Core man, you know. God. So, okay, but if you had a candidate, maybe with the calibre of someone like Ted Cruz, could be different, right? Could be different. Now, I'm going to go back in history a little bit. I'm not recommending who it should be, but I'm just saying he's the front runner right now. You go back in history to 1976. Your country had been losing freedom, Republican, Democrat for years and years and years. But a man came out of California that year who had a different vision. He was sick of that. Ronald Reagan wanted to be president. He stood up and he didn't talk about GNP figures or economic projections or statistics or all the things that Republicans think turn people on. He talked about a shining city on the hill. He talked about American exceptionalism, free enterprise, growing the economy, stopping the communists, rebuilding the country, giving people jobs, American exceptionalism. He talked about a lot of the things you talk about. And he rallied people by the hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. A lot of people like you, not as deep in the Constitution as you, but much like you. And they pushed him forward to get that 76 presidential nomination. And what did the Republican old guard do, folks? Hated his guts. Stood against him every step of the way. Sabotaged him. Mocked him. Ridiculed him. Any of it sound familiar? No matter how many Reagan dinners they might hold today, they hated him back then, folks. Hated his guts. No way, Ronnie, are you going to be our man. And the Grassroots pushed, the GOP old guard pushed back, and Gerald Ford just beat Reagan for the nomination. And Gerald Ford went up against Carter, and Carter won. And how'd those Jimmy Carter years work out for you, folks? Gas queues round the corner, interest rates up to here, Panama, Iran, America's finest hour, right? We're still suffering today from all of that. All of it. Until now, America's worst president. Now, just digress a little bit. I go around this country, around airports all the time. I often wear my Reagan badge. I've had 16-year-old girls with crazy goth haircuts come up to me and say, wasn't he great? How do you think I'd get on with a Gerald Ford badge? Not quite the same, folks. We're all told, right? We're all told we've got to get the young involved. We've got to get the young into our movement. The young people. And to do that, we need hip, cool guys with really nice haircuts and really liberal values. Because that's what the young love, right? Isn't that what the young want? Isn't that what we're told? Who rallied to Reagan and there are hundreds of thousands of people? Where was Reagan's biggest base? The young loved him. They stood behind him. They loved him. They still love him today. Because Reagan stood up. Reagan fought the man. Reagan was an idealist. He wouldn't compromise. He had a vision. Young people haven't learned to compromise, folks. They want somebody who's going to stand up and fight the man. Going to fight for the underdog. Isn't that what young people want? You look at that grumpy old bugger from Texas, Ron Paul. You look at him. He's really hip and cool and charismatic, right? Isn't he? Where's his fan base, folks? The young people love him like a chocolate. They just love him because he stands up and doesn't back down, is consistent and principled. And I don't agree with all of his principles on defence and whatever, but I admire the man because he stands up, and that's what the young people love. That's what they fight for. The young people on the campuses are all either communists, because that's idealistic, or Ron Paulers, because that's idealistic. Now, to win that next election, folks, you need every single element of that old Reagan coalition. Because you've got vote fraud people, you've got the media against you, you've got the unions, you've got dirty tricks, and you've got incumbents. And they've got money. You need every single element of it. Now, if I was a man like Ted Cruz, this is what I'd be doing. Because you need them all to win, people. You can't afford to lose any of your base. You need those 1% of young people who voted Gary Johnson last time, Libertarian. You need the social conservatives and the fiscal conservatives and the defence conservatives. You need the moderates. And you need the 2 million Republicans who stayed home last time. And I tell you who else you need. You need the 4 to 6 million evangelical Christians who don't vote, but have so much to lose. You need every single one of them, folks, and every element of that coalition wants something. They all want something. So if I was Ted Cruz, I'd be wanting to get that coalition together right now and early, before Jeb Bush or Chris Christie started to get money and build up a head of steam. So I'd go to all these groups individually and I'd say this: you vote for me in this election, first thing I'm going to do is put a man like Alan West on my VP ticket. Then I'm going to go to the Libertarians and say, you vote for me in this election, put your 1 million votes behind me, and I'm going to make Rand Paul Secretary of the Treasury. And he can do what he wants to the IRS and the Federal Reserve. Carte blanche. Okay? And for those defence conservatives, John Bolton, Secretary of State. Frank Gaffney, Secretary of Defence. Social conservatives, Dr. Ben Carson, Secretary of Health and Human Services. Energy voters, Sarah Palin's going to be Secretary of Energy, and it's going to be drill, baby, drill. Open up, guys. Mark Levin. Mark Levin, Attorney General. And Ambassador to the United Nations? No one. Now, would you guys rally to a team like that? Yes. Would that enthuse you to get out of bed every morning?
Yes. Yes.
Would you work your little butts off for people like that to get into power?
Sure. Yes.
Would it bring the base together?
Yes.
Is it an impossible dream? No. The base is there, folks. You've never had a bigger base of constitutional conservatives and patriots than you've had now. Bigger than Reagan had. And you've never had the leaders that you've got now who understand what it needs to save this country and are willing and able to do it. You just have to unite the base with the leadership, people. You have to do what Benjamin Franklin told you to do. hang together and not separately. Because you imagine if you got a team together like that, what would the media do then? What would the Democrats do? They'd go mental. They'd go crazy, folks. How would they fight that? Now you think about it. It's all there for the taking. And more people support your vision than support the progressives' vision. You've got freedom and liberty and prosperity to sell. They've got entitlement and abortion. What's the difference? You know? So you've got a choice, all of you as individuals. The next 3 years is going to decide the fate of not just this nation, but the entire Western world. Now you've worked hard, folks. You've worked 3 years very thanklessly. I'm asking you for another 3 years. Another 3 years of hard work. Because I can promise you this. I can promise you, if you do 3 years of hard work, the very least you're going to get out of that is the ability to tell your children, I did everything. And if you win, and you can win, think of the great country you'll leave your kids. Not just as good as you found it, but even better. Even better. Because you can go beyond Reagan, folks. You can do what Reagan only wanted to do. You can restore your constitution and you can gut your federal government. And you can restore liberty and prosperity in this country for your kids and you. Now, we know it's tough, guys. This is not an easy fight. I've been in politics. I see what you do, and I don't know how you do it. But we've got to look back at how tough we've got it. But I was up in Morristown about 4 days ago, New Jersey. And I was shown around the valley where 10,000 of your troops camped out in the winter of 1780. Now that is harsh conditions, people. That was the worst winter they'd had for 100 years. 10,000 troops in a valley with no money and no food and only a little bit of fuel. The officers had to eat their pet dogs, folks, to keep alive. Your soldiers were boiling up their own boots for the leather to eat. 2/3 of that army deserted through that winter. The local population hated them because your soldiers were stealing what little food they had. That was a very, very tough winter. But every winter was tough through that war, folks, as was every summer. Every winter was tough. Valley Forge wasn't much better. It was tough. Now, do you think those patriots in Morristown or Valley Forge, starving and freezing, had any idea of their role in history? Do you think they understood the great country they were creating? You look, people, they were chased across every state. They lost a lot more battles than they ever won, but they won the final one, right? They won Yorktown. That won them the war. But they could have given up at any time, and I wouldn't have blamed them for doing it. A bunch of farmers and lawyers and shopkeepers and blacksmiths and fishermen, and I got to say pastors, Bible in one hand, long rifle in the other, took on the greatest military empire the world had ever seen, and they beat them. And how miraculous is that? Would you have bet on George Washington? No. It was crazy, but they won. And there's a favourite saying of mine from the German poet Goethe: if you are bold, powerful forces will come to your aid. They were bold, folks. The French and Dutch, they came to their aid. But you know there was a lot more powerful forces than that. George Washington fully understood how miraculous his victory was. Has the world changed, folks? Can miracles still happen today?
Yes.
Same forces still exist today, right? If you are bold and you stand up and you stay the course, will you get help? Is your revolution any less miraculous than that revolution?
No.
You just got to stay the course, folks. You've got to do what you know is right. And you can win. And you will get help. I know that, and you know that. So all of you have a choice to make, folks. All of you have a choice what you do in the next 3 years. And I'm asking for your support to do what you've been doing and more of it. I'm asking that. Now, what is your role in history? Because we can see their role in history when they pledged their lives and their liberty and their sacred honour. They pledged everything, folks, on an impossible dream against all the odds. And we can see their role in history, even though they couldn't, because we're looking back 200 years, right? And we can see how it all played out. We can see what caused what. But what is your role in history? Now, to get that perspective, how about you look forward 200 years? You look forward 200 years, you think some young kid in this town will get up in front of a civics class and he'll say this to his friends: hey guys, look how we studied. You know how we studied that Second American Revolution? And all the patriots stood up. The country was done. People thought the country was over. But the patriots stood up against all the odds. They took back the Constitution and they restored the Republic. And the liberty and prosperity we enjoy today, we owe to what they did back then. Well, guess what, guys? This blows me away. I'm just so blown away. I did some research into my family background. You know what I found? I found out my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma and granddaddy, they were in the Chattanooga Tea Party. How proud would you be? How proud would you be? So that's your role in history, folks. So I just want to say to you guys, thank you so much for what you're doing for your country and for my country and for liberty. God bless America and God bless the Tea Party. Thank you.